Hello, this is Soundout here, and welcome back to another Soundout Chronicle Kamen Rider Ryuki review. This time we're looking at Retail Set 2 and Contract Monster Sets 3 and 4. So in this review we have another set of riders, this time being 5 of them, as well as 2 more premium Bandai exclusive Contract Monster sets, one being essentially Genocider and the other being Dark Raider. We're going to go through these much like how we did the last set of Soundout Chronicle Ryuki figures, and if you haven't seen that video, go check it out, because it covers a lot of the basic stuff like articulation and hands that we don't need to go over this time. Much like the last one, this will be a heavily edited video, and I hope you enjoy it. And let me know with a comment down below, or just hit the like button. That would really tell me that you enjoyed this video, and I'd really appreciate it. Also be sure to hit subscribe, because part 3 will be coming. But without further ado, let's dive into the mirror and get into Ryuki Soundout Chronicle Part 2. Alright, before we get into the new stuff, let's do a correction from last time. As pointed out by one of my viewers who asked the question, are the square parts of Metalgelas' knees removable to become the guard vent? I went and looked, and yes, they are. So you can remove the kneecaps and provide a different guard vent for Zolda. This never happened in the show, but it was on the toys prior, and it's still here, so that's a pretty cool feature overall. Soundout Chronicle Ryuki Volume 2 was a retail set of 5 riders, including Kamen Rider Knight Survive, Kamen Rider Guy, Kamen Rider Ouja, Kamen Rider Raia, as well as Kamen Rider Blank. Contract Monster Set 3, which was premium Bandai exclusive, contained Venosnaker, Metalgelas, and Evildiver. And Contract Monster Set 4 included Dark Raider as well as his final vent effect parts. Now before we get into the more elaborate riders, let's start with a simple one, Kamen Rider Blank. This was the form that Kamen Rider Ryuki had prior to contracting with Drag Redder and was seen in the first 2 episodes of the series. Side by side with Ryuki, you can see there are some physical differences, particularly in the helmet where it lacks the dragon symbol. Just like with Ryuki's drag visor, Blank's blank visor can open and accept cards. The only real card of note that Blank ever used was Sword Vent, which provided a very generic basic sword for him to use. And most famously, when he used said sword, it broke. Next up, we have the Rhino-themed Kamen Rider Guy, who looks very nice and has a lot of great silver paint detail that I wasn't expecting. It's mostly on the front of the figure as opposed to the back, but that whole torso is painted. The visor in his shoulder, of course, also opens up, so he can use cards such as and Strike Vent, which summons the head of Metalgelas as a strike weapon, which this is included with Guy himself at retail. Of course, his Advent Beast is the powerful Metalgelas, one of my favorite Advent monster designs, and I gotta give props to the suit actor who played Metalgelas because they had a really good feral intensity to the performance. The articulation of Metalgelas is actually pretty interesting. I thought it would be a lot more restrictive than it actually is, and there is a lot more range of movement to the figure than I really anticipated. He's got ball joints here and there, articulation in the fingers. It really made what is a stocky design actually quite posable. Now, Guy's final vent is quite tricky, so several stand parts were included to attach Guy to Metalgelas in order to make the final vent where they're rushing ahead as a rhino. Unfortunately, I found that Guy is always going to be at an upward angle and not quite the straight ahead running line, because if you try to get it too close to the ground, well, it tips over. That being said, Guy and Metalgelas make a great pairing, especially with all that really, really nice silver paint. Next up, we have Kamen Rider Raia, who has a tumultuous history on this channel because of the Figma Kamen Rider Sting release falling to pieces, and this one holds up a little better, that's for sure. His visor, even though it could have probably had a sliding mechanism, has opted to have an alternate version which pegs onto the back of his left hand. Even though Copy Vent is an ability card that wouldn't have an associated weapon, you could have a mirror Ryuki's Sword Vent, as there was one included with Drag Redder as well as Ryuki himself. Raia's Swing Vent is represented with a single piece here, which is included in the base rider figure, and it's sort of in a swinging motion. His contract monster, Evildiver, is essentially a flat manta ray sort of creature. And what's interesting is that the tail does detach, and it's actually in a different position than the swing vent that came with Raia. There also is a stand peg to connect Evildiver to a stand. Interestingly enough, Evildiver also has articulation, with the tail being able to move down for seemingly absolutely no reason. Now, to properly perform the final vent for Raia, there is a stand piece included that adds foot pegs for Raia to stand upon so you can ride Evildiver like a surfboard. And because that blocks the peg that would normally activate a stand, an additional peg can be attached in order to have this thing up on a stand and looking proper flying through the air. Overall, Raia and Evildiver look great together, and I like the accessibility options to still have this guy flying, as Evildiver was sort of a constantly flying contract monster. It's the scourge of the rider fight, Kamen Rider Ouja. No one caused more chaos than this guy when he appeared on scene. Ouja is essentially like the most evil rider of the group because he was completely unpredictable. But naturally, he does have a ton of accessories to go alongside this. His Venosvisor is one of the weirdest things because he never hardly uses it as a weapon, he just uses it as a vessel for cards. So of course you get a closed version as well as an open version. And his sword vent is the weapon we most commonly see him with, which is why I'm glad that both versions of the visor and the sword vent were included in the base Ouja figure without needing to buy Venosnaker. And I just love this sword design. It just really fits Ouja. It's got kind of sort of a regal look to it, but at the same time very savage with that drill attack. It just looks really cool, and he can get some really cool poses with it. His first contract monster is Venosnaker. Now, Venosnaker may look familiar because he looks very much like Dragretter. In fact, the main body part is essentially the same, and also the tail becomes a weapon, just like Dragretter. So it's kind of got a mirror to Ryuki, and especially since Ouja is like the complete opposite individual from Ryuki himself. Of course, the articulation is pretty much the same as Dragretter. There's just ball joints up and down the snake, as well as some motion in the head, so you get a lot of posing abilities. What's really cool is there's a specific card hand for Ouja, because he typically held the cards upside down to put them into the Venosvisor, and I'm glad that those were included. Performing his final vent is really awesome. With all the included stands and the universal peg system of Chronicle, you can actually put together each step of Ouja's famous final vent kick strike, which of course was the thing that may have caused a lot of problems for several writers. So spoilers for a show that aired 20 years ago, Ouja got into the possession of extra contract cards and ended up taking over other monsters such as Metalgelas. So after contracting with Metalgelas, he gets access to his strike vent. He gets the final vent card, which can be performed double final vent here, which is a really cool addition. And he can do, of course, Metalgelas' final vent attack. Ouja also was able to contract with Evildiver, allowing him to use Swing Vent, as well as, of course, using Evildiver for a final vent attack. But where everything became chaotic is when Ouja came into the possession of the Unite Vent card, being able to combine all three of these Advent monsters. So the actual process of combining Venosnaker, Metalgelas, and Evildiver into Genocider is a little complicated, but not too bad. There's a lot of sliding motion, opening pegs, adding things here and there in order to put this entire beast together. I think the hardest part is probably getting the little peg out of Venosnaker's body, but once it's all lined up and put together, it just looks beautiful. And this is why these three are sold together in the same set. It's because of their combination functionality, which is a step up from the Shochak Henshin line. When they did the Advent monsters, they split up all three of these for some reason, so you had to buy 3 different sets. But I'm glad to see they are a bundle here. And just the overall size and length of Genocider makes him the largest contract monster to date, and he is just a really impressive beast. Naturally, Ouja can do a brand new final vent with this newly formed monster. With a quick swap out of a chest part, you can recreate the final vent where Ouja kicks the opposite rider into a void of destruction. It's a really cool move, and just overall is really awesome that they recreated it here. Ouja is one of the most memorable members of the Kamen Rider Ryuki cast, and having him alongside his combined beast Genocider is just amazing. I love all the options here, a lot of posability, a lot of just great stuff. I'm really impressed with this duo slash quad pod. They're really fantastic. As the Rider fight reached its midpoint, Kamen Rider Knight was given a survive card. a card to power him up and make him more powerful in order to try and survive the Rider fight. So this is Kamen Rider Knight's power-up form, Kamen Rider Knight Survive. And much like with Guy, I was actually surprised at how much metallic paint was on him, especially considering as a retail figure, but overall, a lot of that really nice metallic blue and gold came together in a really nice looking figure. He naturally, of course, comes with the Dark Visor Y, which has a closed version that's on his arm, but also, of course, an open version to accept cards such as For Shoot Vent, either of the visors, whether it's the opened or closed version, can actually open up the side pieces to do the attack form. And I don't ever remember him using the Sword Vent card because he mostly just pulls the sword out of the visor, but that's represented well here because you do have the Sword Vent as well as the Arm Guard. Naturally, his Advent Beast is an upgrade of Darkwing known as Dark Raider, who is just a massive, beautifully huge bat creature, again with a lot of paint, but also a lot of stickers, more so than the other contract monsters. The articulation on Dark Raider is kind of weird. We'll see in a moment because of his transformation. It poses strange. It's not quite straightforward, and he's just very kind of strange to move around. Dark Raider does come with extra cape parts for Knight Survive that allow him to have a more splayed out cape in a more dynamic pose, and I really like these because it looks less flat compared to the base figure. There also is a stand very similar to the one that comes with Metalgelas for those final events, and this stand connects into Dark Raider, allowing Knight Survive to ride on Dark Raider's back as he did in the series. Okay, so the thing about Dark Raider is that he can turn into a motorcycle, and the Soto version definitely can, but it's so complicated, like almost needlessly complicated. A bunch of stuff has to be removed, replaced, turned around, flipped this way, put that way, put together, and 100% of the time I'm not even sure that I'm doing it correctly. It's a lot of sliding motions and getting things lined up just right, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. But the final result can't be argued with. The bike form looks great. The only thing I can say is that the wheels don't really touch the ground because there's not enough clearance, but I am glad that they included 2 kickstands so that this thing can stand almost upright, which is very impressive for a motorcycle. Naturally, Knight Survive looks good on the bike, especially with those splayed out wing parts, and I gotta say, it's a really nice package. I do like it when it's in its bike form, probably more than its bat form.
Final event.
For the final event in the show, Knight's cape wraps around Dark Raider and it becomes this giant torpedo thing. And instead of trying to do anything complicated, they just included 2 giant shells of plastic that clip together to look like the giant torpedo pod thing. That's cool. I like it. So, Knight Survive and Dark Raider are definitely more complex than the previous versions, as they should be with a power-up. And overall, they make a nice pairing. I look forward to Ryuki Survive and Drag Granzer being in the next set of things. So overall, Volume 2 of the Ryuki Soto Chronicle series, as well as the 3rd and 4th Contract Monster set, is great. Honestly, they all look fantastic, they all function really well, and I'm really happy with these. But again, just like with Volume 1, the price is exorbitant because of the contract monsters being P-Bandai exclusive. So I wish you the best of luck out there. These cost me quite a bit, and I'm really happy with them, and the overall set is going to look amazing. But I will look back on it going, wow, that was a lot of cash for what is essentially really nicely painted candy toy figures. But they are really nicely painted candy toy figures, and they honestly are a step above the design work on the SH Figuarts. And for that, I can't fault them. But that price is always going to be a barrier for many. So that does it for this review. Like I said, if you enjoyed it, please leave a like, leave a comment down below, and tell me your favorite Kamen Rider Ryuki Rider, and hit subscribe and the notification bell so you can keep up with future uploads, including Soto Chronicle Part 3. That one's going to be quite a long one, so stay tuned. We'll be doing that when everything shows up. Also, be sure to check out Hero Club at hero-club.com for news, reviews, and more, and my awesome graphic designer on Twitter at darklaw643. And until next time, this is Soundout saying, goodbye.